Hey guys, it's Rainee Romero with the lovely law firm here today for another Carolina Justice Report. We're super excited today. We're chatting with attorneys Sarah Austin and Justin Lovely once more, and we're chatting all about personal injuries involving children. So Justin and Sarah, we're talking about children. I assume that this comes up a lot because usually when we're talking about cases, we're kind of referring mainly to adults. So when it comes to children, do they have kind of a whole different set of rules?
Yeah, so we represent families, right? So a lot of times if you're involved in an auto accident, you have your kids in the back seat, right? So if you get rear-ended, you're going to have a claim, but your kids in the back, they may also have a claim. And so obviously we have to represent the children in their own separate claim in your lawsuit, and it's got different sets of rules, depending on what kind of case they have.
I guess I always assumed when there was like a car accident, it was kind of like one claim, one case for everybody. So really, each individual person gets their own, and the parent files each of those, right?
Right. So if there's damages, there's going to be an individual claim, okay, subject to the available policy limits for the at-fault insurance policy. And then,
in the horrible situation that parent dies or something, then who files it for the kids?
Yeah, so we would have to, we hate those kind of cases.
Right.
But in that case, we have to do some probate work. There'll be, a personal representative of an estate of the parent.
Gotcha.
And they will step into the role to, prosecute the child's claim.
Okay. Well, I know that, so there's some different things here. So it depends on if the child is in the front seat versus the back seat, and there's different kind of ways that you handle each of those. First of all, what kind of is considered a child? Is that under 18 or what?
Yeah. So any kind of minor in South Carolina, it's going to be a minor claim, okay? And then there's going to be different sets of rules signed up. So, if when somebody calls the lovely law firm, the first thing that we do, we try to figure out who's the custodial parent, okay? If there's any kind of like child custody issues or anything like that, because they're going to have to be appointed as the personal, the guardian ad litem of their child, okay? And they will basically step into the shoes of the child and prosecute their claim, okay? So we'll get the judge to approve that parent to serve that role. If there's an argument about it, sometimes there might be a divorce going on or some other kind of issue going on, or maybe their
grandparents.
Grandparents could be involved. So we would sometimes we have to get an attorney involved, a unbiased attorney, third party, just to step in and be that guardian role to prosecute the claim.
Okay. Do we also handle kind of like car seat failures and stuff like that when it comes to accidents?
So yeah, when we're talking about car wrecks, you have your soft tissue cases, and with children it's real hard because they, doctors don't want to give them X-rays especially if they're young, right? And it's hard for a child to articulate what their injuries are. If you and I get in a wreck and our neck's hurting, our back's hurting, we know exactly what to tell the doctor. If you have a 2-year-old who can't talk or is nonverbal, I mean that's hard to figure out.
They're just crying and not sleeping.
Yeah.
And those sometimes are the symptoms of injuries.
Terrible. Yeah.
Right. So. We have to deal with those issues, so that's a problem. But also, that's in the car wreck sense. So we're talking also in like a product liability sense. This is kind of getting off topic from what we're talking about, but we don't want our kids in the back seat of these chairback cases. We were fortunate enough to bring one of those, and for an adult, it causes big problems. But for children in the back seat that might be in a in a car seat, if the chairback falls and hits the child, you're going to have big damages. I mean, sometimes the children can pass away. Sometimes they can paralyze the child because the whole force of the wreck is getting transferred through the parent's body through that seat back onto the child. So those
I've
are
never
very
heard of that. I didn't even know that was
catastrophic claims.
Thing.
Yeah, I know that we brought one before, and I don't know if we've ever actually explained what a chairback case is. Justin probably explains it.
Well, it's
better.
Just, so you have car manufacturers, okay?
Right.
This is kind of getting off topic from children, but
that's okay.
A chairback case is, you have, we examine any kind of catastrophic injury case for potential third-party sources of recovery. And what I mean by that is, if you get hit by an at-fault driver, $25,000 minimum policy limits, but you have catastrophic injuries, well, what's that going to do? It's going to do nothing for you. So what the lovely law firm investigation team does is we go out and we look for, was there tire tread failure? Was there a roof crush? Was there a seatback failure?
Gotcha.
Different product liability cases that we could pursue against the manufacturers of these automobiles.
Okay.
So so to answer your question, going back to what is a seatback failure? These seatbacks are manufactured by usually overseas. They're assembled, if they're assembled here, wherever the manufacturer does, but they put them all together. They put these back onto the roadway, right? And there's several tests. 60 Minutes have done videos and investigations about this. But there's such a low standard to meet to get these things put into these vehicles that at low speed, your seat should never fail, right? You should be held in place. Your occupant should be held in place. There should not be any catastrophic injury on low speed crashes. But what happens is the little hinges in the seat backs are made so cheaply to save money for these automobile manufacturers that these low speed crashes create catastrophic injury when the seat back fails. And again, all that pressure is being absorbed through the body, breaking the seat back, going to the back seat. So if your children are in the back seat, that's bad news.
Yeah.
Okay. It's bad news for you too, because you lose your seat belt. Okay. Right. And you're getting flown through the car, and I mean, it can create these catastrophic injuries that we investigate. That's
terrible. Well, and then going through the process, they have unfortunately been in the car accident, and they go to kind of file things. Does the insurance kind of handle children differently than they would an adult?
Well, again, they're going to look at and say, hey, what are the damages? Okay. And so that's where we go back and we say, hey, is your child able to go to the doctor? Are they getting treatment? Are they able to articulate what the injuries are? Is that being diagnosed by their pediatrician? See, a lot of times they'll say, they'll come in and we know they're hurt, right? But they'll say, hey, they'll tell Sarah, hey, my children's fine. Now, when Sarah reports that to me, I say, no. They need to get into the pediatrician, get a second opinion, and let's make sure these kids are okay.
Yeah.
Because we have to, in order to get full value for the child's claim, they have to have treatment, have to have damages.
Well, and thank God you asked them to do that, because we want to make sure these kids are okay too, and we may not know, right off the bat like that. So.
Absolutely. And if you settle the claim, it's over, it's done.
Yeah. So would you say that it's kind of difficult when you're dealing with children with these cases? Is it kind of a harder case to work?
It's not difficult, but it's different. There's a different approach from the beginning, and then settlement or filing a lawsuit is very different just because of the legal requirements for minors. So we can't settle a case with a minor. If it's less than $2,500, we can just give the money to the parents. But if the child is going to net more than $2,500, that settlement always has to be approved by the court, which makes things take longer. You have the parents' claim already wrapped up and paid, and then they're waiting. We're waiting on a court date, waiting to get in front of a judge. We have to do all those things like have someone appointed a guardian ad litem, like Justin talked about. And then there's different thresholds for what we can even do. So if the child's netting more than $2,500 but less than $15,000, we can still ask the court to give all that money to the parent as guardian ad litem to hold for the child until they're 18. But if the child is going to net more than $15,000, that's when the court will require that we get a conservator appointed, which is a lot more difficult and has to go through the probate court.
Or and a conservator is what, really?
A conservator it's a probate court term. It's like they would do the same thing as the guardian ad litem would, which is hold it until the kid is 18 years old. But there's a lot more requirements. And you've got to put it into a restricted account with the bank and go through the probate court, which is just a process. Sometimes they'll require you to submit a credit report just to make sure that you're financially sound and stable and that you're really going to hold this money until they're 18. Because there are legal consequences, right? If you're a mom and you go out to Las Vegas and spend all your kids' money, then your kid can come after you later and say, my mom spent my settlement money on vacation.
Wow.
So the court wants to prevent that, and so they put in all these restrictions and requirements to just try to ensure that won't happen.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, I mean, just for folks who don't know, what would make that different as far as how much they got back, if it was $2,500 or more or less? What is that? Depends on how catastrophic their injuries are? Or does that matter on their insurance, or kind of everything?
Everything. It matters on their injuries, right? What their claim is worth, and then we're taking into account how much insurance there is, how much money there is to get. But it is that net amount at the end. After all the fees and medical bills and everything's paid, what is that child actually going to take home in their pocket? That's where the thresholds
Interesting. And folks, of course, we want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube and watch all of the videos. We have so many more on this topic and more. But moving back into this, how is this different for things like they're injured at the playground, they're injured, doing other things outside of car accidents. How do we handle
so just like adults are injured, doing everyday things like a slip and fall at a hotel, I mean, children get injured as well. And,
right.
The cases that we see in our office, we see some daycare injuries. We see some playground at schools or playground at these daycare injuries like that. And what's different about that is, South Carolina has an agency, DHEC, that will do a report and see, what was going on there. Was there some kind of other negligent act by the daycare or by the child care provider? Was there some kind of negligent design of this playground equipment? We've had cases like that. And so that's when we can rely on sending our Freedom of Information Act request and get all that information back from DHEC and say, hey, was there a pattern of these kind of issues at this daycare? Throwing that out there, a lot of these daycares with COVID, they were understaffed.
Right.
And so everybody had to go back to work. And so they got to bring their kids. And if they're not watching them, if they're on the playground, bad things can happen and kids can get hurt.
Right.
So sometimes DHEC investigations will reveal a pattern of understaffing. And then we could pursue punitive damages. Okay. And you've heard us talk about that in other episodes, but that's meant to punish and deter this kind of conduct, because the kids are who we need to protect most of all in society, right? And so, and a lot of these are just, it should never happen, right? If they're just watching these kids and taking care of them, they're not going to get hurt on the playground, they're not going to get hurt at daycare, they're not going to get.
It's a lot of negligence.
So that's a little different. We still have to, just like we would a car wreck, we still got to go get treatment, we still got to do our investigation, we still got to work everything up to get to the finish line. But with those kind of cases, there are a couple more issues that we would examine.
Okay. And we were kind of all chatting prior to rolling and about just a lot of cases, or questions I should say, that we get about bullying and people trying to file claims about bullying. Tell me a little bit about kind of the calls you get about that.
So we get a lot of calls about that, and of course, we're the first to stand up for somebody being bullied. Okay, that's what we always stand by. My wife and partner Amy, that's like her passion.
Yeah.
But what parents need to realize is, this world is tough, okay, and not all of these cases are viable. Of course, and that's a tough conversation, because when somebody hurts your kid, you want to.
Yeah.
I got kids. I know exactly how you feel. You're ready to go fight for you. So they're calling us, and we'll talk to you. And sometimes that's our role. We have to be a therapist as well as a lawyer sometimes. But, right. Unless there's something catastrophic, it's not going to be a case.
Unless the school is on notice.
Or absolutely.
Which is difficult. A notice is always difficult to prove.
What does that mean? They're on notice?
That they knew that there was bullying or threats against a particular child, or they knew that they should have known that this catastrophic bullying incident was about to happen.
Gotcha.
Then they're on notice.
But really, that doesn't happen until the child is injured or something like that, right?
Usually, it doesn't happen until the child is injured, and that will be the first time that it happens. But notice is just difficult to prove.
Yeah.
But if it's there, then.
Right.
So what would be kind of your recommendation for parents that call that are being bullied? Do you tell them to go to the police or to the school, or what do you kind of tell them?
Yeah, well, the first thing we always tell them, of course, is to go up the chain of command within the school.
Okay.
And then a lot of times they'll do that, the problem gets resolved. Okay?
Gotcha.
The reason they're calling us is they may call their teacher, internally, or a lot of times there's these apps now that they're using to communicate with their classrooms.
Yeah.
Because everything kind of went virtual because of COVID again. I blame everything on COVID. But they'll use these apps to communicate. They're not getting the answer that they want, or it's getting lost in translation, right? And then that's when they start raising hell and wanting to talk to a lawyer. And that's when we get those phone calls. And then we say, hey, look, call the school resource officer, call the vice principal, call the principal, go up the chain of command. Right. Usually that will get taken care of. And then we recommend, if that's not getting it solved, go up to the school board and see where that can get you. But as far as filing a lawsuit that would be viable in court, would be worth the expense, very few would qualify.
Okay. And of course, nobody wants to think about children, being injured or anything. But of course, it's helpful. The more you know, the better prepared you are to help your kids out. So that's why we kind of wanted to come on and chat about kids today. But thank you both for chatting and shedding some light on children and how to handle those cases.
No problem.
And folks, you of course can watch all of the Carolina Justice Reports. We drop a new episode every Tuesday at 2 p.m. There's tons of great information on there for you to look into, but also you can find us on any social media channel. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere that you can find anything. And then we're also on our website, justiceislovely.com. Thank you so much for watching today. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is lovely, the lovely.